Welcome to the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Now, I'm surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of games in this room, but there are some that still excite and inspire me every time I see them on the shelf and I want to play them. And I'm going to go through my favorite 10 of those in this video. Before I get started, don't forget to check out my website at orderofgamers.com, where you'll find almost 500 rules and references designed by me for you. And also, a lot of those summaries are in my new games app, Tabletop Codex. You can check it out at tabletopcodex.com. If you want to support the fantastic work of the Esoteric Order of Gamers, go along to Patreon and become a supporter. It'll be highly appreciated. Right, let's get started. Okay, let's count down 10 games that still excite and inspire me after all these years. I know there are new ones coming out all the time, but when I see these ones, I just think, oh, gee, I want to play that game. It's still interesting, and they're usually because the theme is really inspiring and drags me in, and there's just something about them that's magical. So let's get started with number 10. It is Chronicles by the Red Joker. Now, this is a slightly obscure one. It was crowdfunded back in 2019. So it's relatively recent, but there's just something about this theme. It is based on a French character called Okko, and it is this sort of medieval Japanese feel, but with supernatural elements as well. And this game is a one versus many game on board tiles, usually about infiltrating a house, fighting the guards there, and exposing the demon. There's sort of a hidden demon mechanic, which is interesting. The game itself works really well sometimes, and sometimes doesn't work really well, but the theme always drags me back in. Now, this initial release was called The Cycle of Water, and there was a crowdfunding for The Cycle of Earth as well. I don't think it's been delivered yet, and the publisher may be having problems. However, this was a beautiful production, and despite some rules issues, which often occur when there's translations from French to English, I've managed to sort it out with my summary, and it plays pretty well, but every time I see it, I want to play it. I don't know why. Number 9 is Tannhauser. This is a skirmish game played on very large boards, and it's got a weird war kind of theme, supernatural elements, but also World War II, weird science, that kind of thing. It also had an expansion, and it came with pre-painted miniatures back in the days when people could afford to make pre-painted miniatures. Now, I forget who the original publisher was, but Fantasy Flight Games took it over and redid the rules, made them a little bit better, and re-released it. And it came in this lovely big box, lots of miniatures and great art. It also had something called the Pathfinder system. It was made up of coloured squares on the board which regulated line of sight and which circles you could attack. A great system in theory. If you were colourblind, forget about it. It didn't work at all. And also, it was just difficult to sort of differentiate between some of the circle colours. So that made it a little bit clunky. However, there is something about it that keeps me wanting to play it. And I haven't played it very often. I don't know why. I think one of the main reasons is that equipment loadouts can be a little bit complicated. And for that reason, I came up with lots and lots of reference cards showing all the different equipment loadouts. It's one of these games, and there are many of them in my collection, where I've spent far more time actually doing reference materials for it than actually playing it. One day I will remedy that and play it more often. But in the meantime, I really like the weird war theme, and there's something about the system that makes me think, oh, I'm sure it works really well. I've just yet to find out whether it really does work really well. Number 8 is Age of Conan. Originally released by Fantasy Flight Games, later picked up by Ares Games, and they made an expansion for it. And one of the reasons they made an expansion is because Conan himself didn't actually feature too much in the original game. This was by some of the designers of War of the Ring, and it uses that system where you roll dice and they have icons on the dice which allow you to take certain actions. It's kind of a big, epic game. And the unfortunate thing about this game is that I've never been able to play it multiplayer. Well, maybe once I played it multiplayer, and it doesn't work as well with 2 players. So it's sitting on the shelf going, play me, because I really like the theme. I love Conan's stuff, and the artwork is really cool. And, of course, I really want to try out the Ares-made expansion, which allows Conan to wander around doing stuff and fulfilling quests and brings him back more centre stage into the game again. So it's a game that I really want to play more. And I've just managed to get a group together of more players, so hopefully I can get more multiplayer games like this out more often. Age of Conan came out in 2009, and I'm detecting a theme here. There's something about 2007, 2009, that period, where some really cool games came out. However, Firefly, number 7 on my list, came out in 2013. This is by Gale Force 9. It's an adventure game set in the universe of Firefly and Serenity by Joss Whedon. This is basically a pick up and deliver game. You can run all over the verse doing jobs, getting paid, causing trouble, and basically being the crew of the ship in Firefly. And again, I love the theme. I really like the original series, and there's something about the theme that's really compelling. This had a few expansions as well, so you can set up a huge board if you put them all together. And there's just something about that open-ended, open world feel to it that really interests and excites me, and I really want to play it more often. Again, I need more players to play this. I think it's not so good with 2. You need a group of players. It does go on for quite a long time, but it's really cool. Gale Force 9 released a big box edition of this. Fortunately, I didn't get to snag a copy where they put all of the expansions into one huge box. But yeah, when I played it, I really enjoyed it, and I want to play it more. Talking about big boxes, well, the old coffin box from Fantasy Flight Games. This was 2007, yes, that magic 2007 period again. Tide of Iron from Fantasy Flight Games. Look at that box, and it's really heavy because it came with mat boards that are kind of like MDF, really. They're really heavy, thick mat boards, which gives this game a real tactile feeling. It also came with heaps and heaps of miniatures. There is a series of expansions as well, and then it was taken over by another company who re-released some of the old expansions and brought out a new one for Stalingrad. This is quite a complex game. There's a lot to it, and the scenarios are quite interesting. It's one of those ones that's slightly puzzly in that there are, a limited number of, well, there's lots of things you can do, but there's really a limited number of winning options. It's one of those games I look at and I want to play more often, but I just have to really have the time to get back into it. I spent a lot of time making a rules and reference for this one to make the whole system as clear as possible, because it is complex. And in fact, these old Fantasy Flight coffin box games were all pretty complicated. I played StarCraft, the board game, again the other day, and yeah, it was long and complicated, and I just thought, I'm just never going to play this game again, because there are so many more games that are better, that are shorter, and time is limited. And this one is going to take up a lot of time to play. It plays well with 2 players, which is great. But yeah, you've really got to devote the time to it. And I've got all the expansions, and I haven't even touched those yet. When you paint up the little miniatures, it looks great though. And if you're looking for a World War II tactical experience, it's a beauty. Number 5 on my list of games that still really excite and inspire me is The World of Smog, Rise of Moloch by Simon Games. And this one came out in 2018. That still seems relatively recent, but wow, it's 7 years ago now. I can't believe it. Now, this one is set in a Victoriana, an alt-Victoriana universe. It was based on a game called Smog, which was a miniatures game, which had 54mm figures, so large figures. So Simon got the license, and they shrunk them down, and they made more miniatures. And it's really imaginative. I love the miniatures in this set. It had a whole lot of expansions as well. I've painted up everything. I went all in on this one, and I painted them all, which took me ages and ages. And I really want to justify all that work by playing this more often, because it is fun. It's a 1 versus many game. It uses board tiles. It's got scenarios. It's relatively simple. It's not overly complex. And it's heaps of fun, and the theme just drags me in. It absolutely drags me in. I love this kind of weird Victoriana supernatural kind of feel. And in fact, that's another theme coming up here as well. The sort of weird war, the alternative stuff. I seem to really enjoy. Really, really good game, and I've got to play it more often. I see it on the shelf, and I've got to play Smog more often. Number 4 is the most recent game on this list. 2022 saw the release of Oathsworn Into the Deepwood by Shadowborn Games. Wow, and this is just the core box. If you've got all the miniatures and terrain, there's a heap more boxes as well down there. And this one always drags me back in. We're still working our way through the campaign, and there's heaps and heaps and heaps more to go. And every time I've played it, I've enjoyed it, I have to say. It's broken into 2 phases. There's a story phase, which is a sort of choose your own adventure kind of thing, though more interesting than that. And then you've just got a combat phase where you're usually fighting one big bad or a big bad and some minions. And the combat system works really well. It's card driven. It's really cinematic and dynamic, which is what I love about it. You feel like you're jumping around and being pushed and run over and jumping through trees and making huge strikes. It just feels like a kind of, Avengers type battle scene. So this game is going to keep me busy for a long time. And I look at it on the shelf and think, oh, we've got to play the next installment in that. The only problem, of course, is that it's a huge campaign and we can't play it all in one, series of games. So when you go back in, you tend to sort of forget the story a bit, which is a shame because the story is really compelling and it's interesting and does interesting things. I think this is a fantastic game, and I'm really looking forward to the new one by Shadowborn Games, which they crowdfunded a little while back, which is set in a alternative Arthurian legends kind of universe, and looks like a completely different game. So we'll see if they can recreate their success and come up with a game as good as Oathsworn, because I think this is an absolute classic. I've noticed that a lot of these games come in really big boxes. Interesting. Dust Tactics! This is the first edition of Dust Tactics Fantasy Flight Games, 2007 again. What was in the water that year? Wow, some great stuff. Dust is close to my heart. It was by Paolo Parente, and this was kind of the original game that he pitched to Rackham Entertainment, but they wanted to go sci-fi, so they went to AT-43 instead. And then after that all folded, Parente went to Fantasy Flight Games and pitched his original idea, which was Dust, which is alternative, again, weird war, with a very World War II feel, but it's got sort of aliens and stuff in it as well. Though the aliens were never quite realised, it didn't last that long. However, they did release some amazing figures, because Parente worked from a studio in China that created miniatures and may still do so, I don't know, but I don't think he's involved with it anymore. And they released huge vehicles for this game. The only problem is when Fantasy Flight decided not to support it again, they obviously had a huge backlog of stuff and they released a lot of it quite cheaply. So I remember picking up amazing, huge vehicle figures for a song, really. They were really cheap. And of course, when they tried to re-release the game with other companies, Battlefront, that was a bit of a disaster. When Battlefront did it, they did a crowdfunding campaign. There were all kinds of problems with that. And then Parente took it back again and did Dust 1947. So it's been through a lot of iterations, this game. But of course, after they'd released all of that backlog of miniatures cheaply, it was difficult to go back and sell them for normal price again. So long history, very troubled, but a great game. There are two kind of versions of it, basically. You can play it on a grid system, big squares, which is sort of a simplified, fast-playing game, which is fun. Or you can play it like a classic tabletop miniatures game with tape measures and all the rest of it. However, I don't know if you can get much Dust stuff online anymore, but it's a game that I look at and always want to play. We're down to the last couple of games that still excite me and inspire me after all these years. And number 2 is Man of War. What a classic, absolute classic by Games Workshop. 1993, the earliest game in this video. And I still want to play this all the time. I've got quite a good collection of Man of War figures. They cost a fortune now these days if you want to buy them, the old metal ones. I'm sure people have made dodgy 3D versions that you can get or similar and somehow get hold of the rules and play this game. It's probably, it's been a long time since I played it, so it's probably getting a bit fiddly and long in the tooth these days, but lots of good memories of playing this game and enjoying it. So it's definitely got the nostalgia thing for me when I see it on the shelf, though I haven't played it for a long, long time. Man of War, absolute classic, number 2 on this list. Well, folks, we're down to number 1 now, and I hope you've enjoyed this video looking at some of those games that I will never part with. And every time I see them, I just get a bit of a thrill and it makes me want to play games. I find there are so many games coming out now that the enthusiasm for me has gone down a little bit because there's just so much noise in the board game industry with new games coming out all the time. And it's very rare that you sort of get one that is really exceptional these days. And it's interesting to see that around 2007, A lot of amazing games came out. Games, of course, that I prefer, which are really thematic, usually big box ones, it seems. Ones that really draw you in with their theme. And I've never made a secret of the fact that they're the kind of games that I enjoy the most. It did feel like a little bit of a golden age back then, but you never know. These things go in peaks and troughs, and there will be another golden age just over the horizon, I'm sure. However, let's get to number one. It is, of course, AT43. I love this game. Why do I love this game so much? I don't know. I've got 5 of these starter sets, 5, which I picked up. And when this came out, it was just really exciting and thrilling. There's something about this big starter set, and it had this flap so you could see what was inside. Really nice, a lot of air in there, but really nicely displayed what you could get. And it's pre-painted, so you could just open this up and think, oh wow, I can get playing with that straight away. It's such a tragedy that Rackham Entertainment obviously had some problems with the way it was run. I think there was a lot of creative people running it who weren't too good on the financial side, and then it was taken over by an investor or something, and everything didn't work. They overproduced, and it wasn't successful enough to take off. And the reason was, of course, is that Rackham used to make amazing metal miniatures, which were absolutely beautiful. And when they went to these pre-painted games, this one in Confrontation, a lot of people were disappointed because they were painted plastic, and it was a completely different direction. They made the mistake of focusing on the games rather than the miniatures. And Games Workshop, of course, were very clever and focused on the miniatures more than the game. And I find that really interesting. However, this is a good game. The only problem is that it was one edition. It never got updates. There was one FAQ or something, but it never got a chance to develop further. But out of the gate, it was pretty innovative. It had innovative mechanics like using cards to come up with your order of activations and a whole list of options for activating units and the order they were activated in. It also had officer to officer measuring for range and things, which was unusual. And of course, those pre-painted miniatures, just great. And they just released so much stuff for this in a short period of time, of which I have truckloads because I like the game so much. But I just don't get the time to play it as much as I'd like to, because it's an old game and I've got to get back into the rules. But you can play small games of this. There are scenarios, you can play little games. I have done so much work on redoing all the unit cards for this game. If you go to my website and find the AT43 page, it's basically the only place on the internet where you can find everything about AT43 anymore. Not only can you find all my redesigned unit cards, so you could proxy out miniatures and still play the game, but you'll also find all the original stuff that they released on PDF as well. I'm trying to keep AT43 alive. I don't know if it'll ever come back, but there's something about the background which is kind of a bit more hard sci-fi. It's less gothic and more hard sci-fi. There's some really nice concepts in there, and the factions are interesting. If you love cigar-chomping gorillas in power armor, you're set. It's very, very cool. It's also, you can see the influence of Dust, as I said before, because you have kind of a communist Russian faction. So it's got a bit of weird war in there as well. There's just something really, really compelling and interesting and inspiring about the background to AT43, and I've really got to play it more. That's it, folks. As always, please like and subscribe. If you enjoy the work of the Esoteric Order of Gamers, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I'd really, really appreciate it. It allows me to keep going on after, 12 years or something now. And also, I've got Tabletop Codex, my fantastic app. I really want you to check it out. It's on Google Play and Apple Store, and I think you'll find it incredibly useful. It's being updated all the time. I will see you next time, and thanks very much for watching. Good gaming!